Hey guys, welcome back. We're going to do some more asks. Hey, I've just got a quick question. I'm a new member of TD and Bethyl. Welcome. However, I've secretly always liked Beth and Daryl as a couple during my first rewatch of TWD almost a whole decade ago. Watching your vids have basically convinced me that Beth is coming back. Yay! However, parts of me still worry it won't happen. I told my mom about it, and while she does agree with all the things and clues I told her about, she did mention that sometimes when you're looking for something hard enough, you're usually going to find it, basically warning me that all the symbolism TDers are finding may just be wishful thinking. What do you think about this? So this is called confirmation bias, and it is a real thing. But I don't really see it being the case with Beth. And the reason is it would have been very easy, as I've said this before, it would have been very easy for them to shut down TD before we ever really got started. If, okay, before I get too much into the weeds, confirmation bias, it is what your mom said. If you're looking for something, you're really intent on finding something that means something, then you probably will. And that's just your bias. It's not necessarily the truth. But the main reason that I don't think that's the case with Beth, I understand why people say that. I understand where it's coming from. There is so much. And there are so many things that are weird. There are so many things that are contradictory. There are so many things that the writers have told us to look for. And like I said, there would have been a very easy way to shut us down, and they specifically didn't. So if it was just a matter of, oh, we didn't want her to die, and therefore we think she's coming back, that could just be confirmation bias. But it's not just that. It's everything they set up early in the show. It's Gimple telling us that the clocks in Slabtown meant something. It's the fact that her death made no sense, not only in the aspect of they set it up and then just decided to kill her off rather than paying everything off, and that is not something that Gimple does, and that is not something that this show does. But also in the sense that it didn't make sense that Dawn shot her. Like her gun was not out of her holster, so we're missing something there. And I always point to Daryl and Carol going off the bridge in the van and how it looked really unrealistic because it went down nose first and then landed on all four tires. And so, like, in terms of physics, that wasn't terribly realistic, but the writers knew it wasn't realistic. They couldn't get it to work the way that they wanted to, and they had a finite amount of time and a finite number of vans that they could drop. Like they had to buy entire vans to crash to do that scene, and they had like four of them, and they just didn't have any more. So what they did is they came out afterward. They did a segment on The Talking Dead explaining what happened and why, and saying, yeah, we know that wasn't realistic. We're sorry. It was just the best we could do in the time and budget we had. So even with all things being equal, and even if everything had played out the way that it did in Coda, if the writers had just come out and said, we know that was unrealistic, we shot it this way because of X, Y, and Z, this is what we were going for, we hear you that TDers want Beth back, but I'm sorry, that's not where we're going with it. You know what I mean? They could have come out and shut us down, and then everyone would have been like, oh, that sucks. And that would have been the end of it, you know, but they never did that. They put out an episode that didn't make any sense, that left all these holes in her plot line. We never saw what happened to her body after them telling us that things in her storyline were really important and that we should look at them for clues. And then the mountain of evidence that we found ever since then. The fact that Daryl is still looking for a love interest. The fact that, all of this stuff, the suspiciousness of Emily, all the clues, all the things in her music videos, all the things in other shows that I talked about in my last video that are clues. I mean, just everything all together, not all of that can be confirmation bias. One or two things by itself might be, but after that, assuming that it is confirmation bias and we're not true, she should have been treated equally as all the other characters. She should have been given a better send-off. They should be willing to say her name every once in a while. There shouldn't be more merchandise that circles around her than any other deceased character on the show. There's all these different weirdnesses, right? So I do understand what your mom's saying, and I understand the worry behind that. And I mean, I shared it myself when I first started. When I first found TD, I found them between when Coda aired and then when 509 aired, right? So between the season break between episode 8 and 9. And I wasn't sure. I was like, I really want to believe this. And I had a really good feeling about it, but I was like, but is it really? I don't know, And then I've told the story a million times when 510, which was them, aired. That's what really cemented me in TD because it was very obvious to me that the music box was a symbol of Beth, and then it woke up. And I was like, yeah, no freaking way. That is just a coincidence. You know what I mean? So the rest is history. So I understand, and I think it is a real thing, but when confirmation bias is usually something where you're really reaching and you're trying to force something to mean something that it doesn't mean. And I get that people who are skeptics and that don't like TDers and especially carolers and other shippers, they probably do say that about us and they do genuinely think that's what we're doing. But when you have a mountain of evidence, when you have dozens and then hundreds of things that point to it, and once again, I mean, the show has not ended. Daryl has not gotten a love interest, a long-term one anyway, that isn't toxic. Um, that stops being confirmation bias, right? And starts being like really obvious. So that's my thoughts about that. I don't know if that helps, but your mom is right that it is real. I just don't think it applies anymore to us because there's just too much. Thank you for sending that in. All right. Do you think there's a chance they'll do a spinoff just about Beth? We know that what happened right after Coda has yet to be shown, but it would be great to show at least part of what happened to Beth, even in the years she was separated from her family. I do think it's possible. I don't know for sure what they're planning. In terms of what hasn't been seen yet, I don't think that it's going to take more than an episode or two to show. So I kind of look at the governor's episodes from season 4 as a template. Um, the virus story at the prison was actually only 5 episodes. It wasn't the entire 8. And then 6 and 7 were about the governor and what happened when he left. And then, of course, we had 8 where he arrives and bulldozes the prison and all of that. I think it'll be something similar. Even though it feels like they have a lot of scenes to show, it probably is not as many as we're thinking. So I think they'll be only, they could probably tell her backstory, at least what happened in Atlanta, in 1 or 2 episodes. Now, what you're saying is that there could be a lot more about what she's been up to in the intervening 10 years. I agree with that. And they could. I mean, it would be fun if they did a spinoff that was just about Beth. That would be really great. But in terms of, whether they'll be able to fit her backstory in, I don't think they'll need a separate spinoff for that. I think they'll be able to fit it in just fine, however they want. And of course, they can do whatever they want with it. If they want to expand it and purposely to do a spinoff, they certainly could. But I just don't think it's absolutely needed. And then down the line, like they could have something that they know happened, in the intervening years to her that's going to be relevant down the road. Like maybe if, as we've conjectured, maybe if all the spinoffs end and they come back into a central show or something. But they could always show that later. They don't have to show it right away. So, yeah, I think it's definitely possible. And obviously, we would all be down for that. We would love to watch it, but I don't think it's necessary. And yeah, we'll just have to wait and see what they decide to do with it. So either way, I'm here for it, right? Okay. I was thinking back to the fight between Father Gabriel and Sasha in episode 16 of season 5. Based on Sasha's behavior and what Gabriel says, I think that Beth was definitely left in the trunk of a car because of a large horde of walkers, but that at the time of putting her body in a shelter or shortly before, she regained a minimum of consciousness or signs of her survival appeared, and that she was left there anyway. I think that at the moment, the small group that was carrying her was composed of at least Sasha and Tyreese. Sasha made the decision to leave her in the trunk, even though it was clear that she was still alive, while Tyreese, who was carrying Beth in the meantime, was convinced by his sister to put her there, even though he didn't completely agree with her. Gabriel was probably also present with them and witnessed the scene. When the group was completely reunited, once the danger had passed, the incident came out, and when they went back to get Beth, she was gone, leaving people to think that she had not survived in the end and that she had revived or worse, eaten. This would explain Daryl's anger towards Sasha in particular and Maggie's desperation, as well as Tyrese's sense of guilt that shines through in his hallucinations. I think that Rick took Sasha's side anyway, or that he was directly involved in the decision to abandon Beth, and this would explain why Daryl was also so angry with Rick. I hope the message is clear. English is not my native language. It is. Yeah, so this is what I always referred to back in the day as the Sasha Tyreese theory, and there's lots of variations of it, so you very well could be right. I think that there's a good chance. I was thinking about this actually not too long ago. I wonder if all of Team Family is even on the same page about what went down back then. So what I mean is, excuse me, I've always thought of the timeline as being a little bit different than this, that whatever happened with Sasha happened after they returned for Beth. So like it would be that they all put her in a car after so they were at the white church. They were trying to give her a burial, but the walkers came through. And I'm pretty sure that's what happened based on what happened to Father Gabriel's church. It was a foreshadow of what was going to happen at that white church. So I think we can pretty confidently say that happened. But then they needed to run from the hordes, and she was literally dead weight, which is what the name of one of the governor's episodes are. I think that was a hint. And so they left her in the car where she would be, quote unquote, safe until they could come back and finish the burial. But when they come back, the door is open and she's gone. So they assume she's turned and go looking for her. And this is when everything went down with Sasha and Tyreese. Now, I don't know if that's the way it happened or the way that you have described as the way it happened. It could be either one, equally possible. And it really is going to end up being like what we're talking about here is origin stories to what we saw, right? We saw Rick being pissed at Sasha and at Rick, or I mean, sorry, Daryl being pissed at Sasha and at Rick. And like you said, Tyreese being guilty, which is something that I always kind of forget about, not forget about, but I don't remember to incorporate that Tyreese did seem to be part of this and was feeling very guilty, and he really shouldn't have based on what we saw in Coda. Anyway, so whichever order it happened in, I think you're right, that this is something along these lines is what happened. And what I mean by I wonder if they're on the same page is I remember someone, quite a few people probably, having the theory that maybe Sasha shot Beth, like if they thought she was a walker and Sasha saw her at a distance, like staggering away or what she thought was Beth, and shot her. Um, and then I remember people even saying maybe she realized that Beth was conscious and shot her anyway or left her anyway. Personally, I don't think that's the case because Sasha was not a bad person. At the end of the day, if she had any inkling at all that Beth might be alive, she would want to help Beth and nurse her back to health and take her back to Daryl. Like, I don't see Sasha doing something like that. Now, there very well could be variables that we don't have yet that would explain why she would. So I could be wrong about that just because we don't have the full story. Maybe she did it because she thought she was saving everyone else or something like that. But what I mean about them not being on the same page is what if what happened with Sasha and Tyreese and Father Gabriel, like you said, if they split up, so they were all looking for Beth in different groups, I totally think that probably is what happened. They wouldn't stay in the same group, much like with Sophia, they would break up into small units and go looking for her. So whatever happened, maybe it happened with Sasha and Tyreese and Gabriel. Maybe it is what people have conjectured that she saw a walker they thought was Beth, maybe wearing similar clothes with blonde hair. They just thought it was her. Obviously, we don't think it was because we think she lived and was probably taken completely away from there. But she shot this walker. Then she goes back to Rick and says, "This is what happened." And then Rick tells Daryl, "Okay, we're leaving." You know what I mean? And they would probably do that to protect him in a way. Um, but I wonder if they're even all on the same page, if like some people know this and some people know that, and they didn't tell Daryl everything. And you know what I mean? It could be something like that too. Like maybe they don't even all know the same stuff about what happened. There's no way to know. It was just something I was thinking about before. Anyway, but yeah, I totally agree with what you're saying. I mean, the more we go back and revisit these things, like I said, there's no reason for Tyreese to feel particularly guilty about Beth. Messed up about it, yes. Traumatized by it, yes. Because you see someone get shot in the head right in front of you, that's going to do a number on you emotionally and psychologically. But he really did seem guilty about it. And his hallucination of Beth was constantly comforting him and saying, "It's not your fault. It's okay." And it's like, why would you think that was your fault? There was nothing about that was Tyrese's fault. And then, yeah, the Sasha thing, we have Daryl being pissed at Sasha, and we were never told why. I mean, we can figure out the Rick thing because again, the girl on the tree that Daryl sees, it's clear that he was not able to put Beth to rest. And so that probably has a lot to do with it. But why would he be mad at Sasha about that? Rick is the leader. He's the one that told them to move on. Even if Sasha sided with Rick, that's still not really a reason for him to be mad at her. So yeah, there's definitely some weirdness. And then you could say the same thing about Father Gabriel. He talks about sacrificing one of their own. That doesn't make sense given what happened at Grady. Um, it was an accident from their point of view and from what we saw. Or if you don't want to call it an accident, like I don't know that Daryl thought it was an accident, but it was an enemy who shot her. I mean, none of the group made the decision to sacrifice her. Like that doesn't make sense. Why would Gabriel say that? So there's clearly stuff that we don't understand, that the characters understand. And even the fact that Sasha got so angry and almost shot Gabriel after that. I mean, he was hitting a nerve. That was triggering her. No pun intended, because she had a gun, but big time triggering her, right? So there was something that she felt immensely guilty about that caused a lot of trauma. So, yeah, I mean, I totally agree. No matter which way it went down, I really like the way that you've laid this out, because these are the essential components that we are, I shouldn't say sure of, but relatively sure of, that it's hard to um, say are not the case based on the evidence that we do have. But as I always say, I think we're also missing some stuff for sure that, we have not even had any inkling of yet. So yeah, I really like the way that you have laid this out, and I look forward to finding out finally what actually happened. The other thing that kind of comes to mind is I feel like there's something more about the cars, and it's something that we don't understand. So, number one, there was a report, and again, it was like a spoiler message that was posted and then I think taken down later. But it said that there was a huge car chase. It was at night, if I remember right, and it was near the place where they filmed for Terminus. And it was unclear if that was, if like in the show they were actually near Terminus, or if that just they happened to be filming in the same spot, but it really had nothing to do with the Terminus storyline. But it was a big car chase, and they said a lot of the major characters were there, like Rick and I think they mentioned Rick and Maggie. I don't know who else. So there's that. And then there's the fact that in them, 510, when they all come across, it's like a snarl of cars on the freeway, like they all got jumbled up and then people couldn't get anywhere, so they abandoned their cars. So this is when Maggie sees the Beth Walker in the trunk. Daryl freaks out about that. And yeah, you could explain that by the fact that they left Beth in the trunk of a car, but I feel like there's more that we're not getting yet because they pass cars all the time. They see cars all the time. And it's not like he freaks out about every single car they walk by. You know what I mean? It's something about the snarl of cars on the freeway, and they all stop and they all look at it like they're freaked out, but then they kind of go, "Okay, it's all right. Let's go through them and look for supplies." But Daryl is out of there. He just pieces right out. So there's something more that has to do with cars, and I think it may have to do with whatever was being reported about this car chase thing. So there's things that we really know nothing about, because I have no idea what that was or how it would fit into our theories, but it freaked Daryl right out of his shorts, right? So there was something big that went down that has to do with the cars too. Um, so anyway, I don't know. I think that we're right, but I also half wonder if when we get the full story, we're going to be like, wow, we were way off, but it's because we didn't know all of the variables. We didn't, I mean, what if we only know a quarter of the variables? You know what I mean? There might be a lot more that we're just not getting at all. Anyway, so thanks for sending this in. It's always fun to revisit this theory, and it's another way to point out, as you know, I talked about in the previous ask about confirmation bias. I mean, this is not confirmation bias. This is stuff that was reported and has not seen the light of day yet. All of the stuff from season 5, it's not just people try to play it off as, oh, it was just a deleted scene. No, there is no possible way it is a deleted scene. We would have seen it by now with the deleted scenes in the DVD extras, if it was a deleted scene. And people like the owner of the White House said that he was allowed to take pictures on set, but told he couldn't post them until the footage aired. He has not posted them yet. And if they had said, oh, we're not doing this, we're scrapping it because we decided to kill Beth off instead, he would have posted the pictures. He's holding on to them because the footage hasn't posted yet and they're still planning to post it. That's not confirmation bias. Okay, that's fact. So anyway, sorry. I'll get off my soapbox now. Thank you for sending that in. Always fun to look back at these things and remember how much weirdness there was in season 5 around Beth's disappearance. All right, next one. Not sure if anyone's ever said this, but I think the reason why Maggie became such a vengeful character, especially towards Negan, is because she lost the majority of her loved ones to antagonists of the flagship show. Otis, sacrificed by Shane and eaten by walkers. Jimmy, eaten by walkers. Patricia, same thing from the same night. Her father, Herschel, decapitated and executed and unalived by the governor. Her sister, aka our queen, Beth Mother effing Green, love it, unalived by apparently Don Lerner or another shooter behind her. Her late husband, Glenn, head bashed brutally and unalived by Negan. Yeah, I mean, you're right. When you lay it all out that way, I can be kind of critical of Maggie for not being very nurturing. But yeah, she's been through a little bit of stuff here, right? There's a pattern I've noticed. The first three were taken out by walkers. The second half three were taken by living people, but overall antagonists. And it was all out of Maggie's hands entirely. There wasn't anything she could do. We never got to see her grieve for Herschel Sr., but I personally interpret it as she didn't have the luxury of timing to do so, mainly because she just escaped with Bob and Sasha from the prison and was searching for mainly Glenn, gave up on her sister, but she had that emotion pent up for a bit until she saw Daryl carried Beth out in his arms, looking lifeless, and Maggie assumed the worst and just had to let it out. What do you think? Yeah, I mean, nothing in that is anything I disagree with. I think that Maggie, people were really critical of her not looking for Beth, and I understand why, but they're also not taking into account that every single person after the prison went down went into survival mode. They were in fight or flight mode. Um, and we saw that in various ways, depending on their personality. Michonne went back to like having her pet walkers. Um, Rick and Carl were butting heads in like a very masculine sort of way. And of course, Daryl turned into a robot. Beth wanted to go find alcohol. These are all ways that they were coping. And I think with Maggie, it probably was to a certain extent that she assumed, I think she assumed that looking for Beth would not be very productive. And by that, I mean, either she's assuming that Beth is dead and she doesn't want to deal with it. So she's just not going to worry about it or think about it or deal with it. And that probably does show that she thought Beth was weak. And, so I understand why people were angry with her about that. But the other option is that Beth did survive, in which case Maggie probably thought she got out with somebody. Like, I can see her thinking that. Either she's with someone who can protect her, which she was with Daryl, or she died. And either way, Maggie doesn't want to deal with that right now. Glenn was her lifeline. So, in order for her to survive from an emotional perspective, she had to find Glenn. And after that, she could worry about finding Beth, right? And yeah, I mean, you could certainly be critical of her for that. I understand. But again, she was just in survival mode. Like, it was so traumatic to see that she was just doing what she could. She was in full fight or flight mode, right? And the only thing she could think to do to keep herself breathing and not completely melting down is to look for Glenn. Then she found Glenn, which was good. But I think when Daryl told her Beth was alive, and then they found her at the hospital, it was like, okay, good things are happening. Good things are going to come out of this. And then, yeah, I agree that when she saw him carrying Beth out, not only was that really letting the air out of that hope that Beth would be alive for her, but it's also all the emotion and all the stuff she hasn't let out and grieved for coming out, And so Beth was, I mean, they talked about that a lot. The writers did around the show about how Beth's death, it wasn't even just the fact that another person died. It was that all of them, even the ones who weren't close to her, obviously it's going to be a big deal for Maggie and for Daryl and for those who were really close to her. But even for the other characters who weren't as close to her, it represented this downfall of hope for them. And it was just so disheartening. Doesn't even think it covers it. It was just so tragic, devastatingly tragic, And so, yeah, I agree. And I think that you've really laid this out well. I hadn't really thought about it that way in terms of Maggie, but man, yeah, she's been through some stuff, and that's why she is who she is in the current day. And I really do hope, I'm still on the fence about, there's that line from Still where Daryl says, "You ain't never going to see Maggie again." And people have asked me about that. They're like, okay, well, if everything's a foreshadow, isn't that a foreshadow? And if Beth really is alive, is Maggie going to die? Like, how is that going to play out? I don't know. I'm like 50-50 on it, because on the one hand, I can see it being purely symbolic in the sense that even if Beth didn't die physically, which we don't believe she did, as a person, as the more innocent part of herself, that part of herself probably did die. And it's tragic on the one hand, but it's also just part of life, right? They sometimes call these shamanic deaths, which means the death of who you are today, but it's in service of becoming someone else tomorrow, like becoming stronger, becoming more enlightened, that sort of thing. So you could say that Beth, as she was never going to see Maggie again, and death. And I mean, that could have, I do think that that was definitely a foreshadow of her getting shot at Grady and being believed to be dead. But is it going to be true in the long term? I don't know. If Beth's coming back, that could mean that Maggie's going to die and they're really not going to see each other again. And that would suck. I really want her and Maggie to come back together and see each other again. But I honestly don't know because yeah, y'all are right. Like that is a foreshadowing line, but I don't know how literal it's going to be. So I hope it's not literal. Let's put it that way. I really do hope that Maggie and Beth get to see each other again, but if they don't, we will be able to look back at that and say, look, they foreshadowed this back in still. So I don't know, but Maggie's been through the ringer for sure. And so I try to, even though I get a little frustrated with her not being as nurturing as I would like her to be, I haven't been through all the things she's been through. So you know, I try to give her some grace too. So thanks for sending that in. Really, really interesting way to think about things. Call it there for today, guys, and I will be back soon. Talk to you later.